Welcome to another edition of Rider Nation Station, presented by American Manufacturing Solutions, your total logistics partner, investing in Rider Nation Station and St. Mary's, Ohio, as well as Plus One Professionals Real Estate, your local real estate agency, and to our other fine sponsors.
For families in St. Mary's, Ohio, summer usually means trips to Kings Island or Cedar Point, world-renowned roller coaster theme parks. But these style parks owe their existence to older, smaller regional parks that first created the roller coaster fever. In the early 1900s, America saw an explosion of amusement parks. Taking advantage of the country's expanded electrical grid, many amusement parks evolved from older resorts and weekend escapes. Our very own Grand Lake St. Mary's was home to one of these such parks, Gordon State Park. It was built on 13 acres on the northeast corner of the Great Grand Lake Reservoir. It provided excitement, refreshment, and entertainment. Built in 1924, the park was said to have brought 45,000 person crowds on its busiest days, brought there by railway. Today's Rider Nation Station guest could be asked to discuss many different aspects of St. Mary's, Ohio. A longtime teacher and football coach, our guest could speak about the history of our school system and athletics from the 1960s to present. A beer aficionado, he could share with us his favorite IPAs or stouts. Or as an amateur genealogist, he could pore through records to discover some of the unknown secrets of our St. Marian ancestors. But it's his passion for roller coasters around the turn of the century and his dedication to discovering everything he can about our own lake's Gordon State Park which brings him to Rider Nation Station today. Therefore, I'm excited to welcome to Rider Nation Station, Mr. Denny Long. Thanks for coming, Denny. Denny, I thought it would be nice to tell some of the viewers out there, most of the town I'm sure knows you, but for those that don't, tell them a little about yourself and how you came to St. Mary's.
Well, I went to Bowling Green for college, and the senior year in the spring, I was sitting in my house trailer with my wife, and there's a knock at the door, and it was H.H. Cook, superintendent of St. Mary's school system. And he said he was looking for an English teacher. Now, he had two requirements. Had to be an English major, had to be a man. Couldn't do that today. But there were two of us and in the whole school, university, that were male English majors. Now, I don't know what happened to the other guy, but anyhow, H.H. asked me to come to St. Mary's, said, look around, talk to people, see what you think of the place, which I did. I met Skip. That pretty well sealed the deal right there.
What year was that?
1962.
Okay.
Yeah. So we moved here and been here for ever after.
Did you think that when you first moved here that you would be staying here this long?
No, absolutely not. Skip didn't either. And I didn't buy a house for 3 years. I rented, and Skip 6 years. He came in second for a lot of coaching opportunities. He hit it wrong, came off a couple really bad seasons after being undefeated in 60. So we're here.
Besides Skip, were there any other individuals in St. Mary's that introduced you to the area?
Oh, Don Martindale, Cork. Yeah, we survived because of him. He did everything from keep my car running to keeping my furnace working out at the lake, and show me where to go and where not to go. And so, yeah, Don was a big help.
We've brought you here to discuss history, and specifically St. Mary's history. Have you always been into history, or is that something that developed in your adult years?
No, actually, history is my favorite subject in school, always has been, and physical education. But when I graduated from high school, there was a severe teacher shortage in all but two areas, history and physical education. And I wanted a job more than I wanted a hobby, so I majored in chemistry and a second major in English. Figured I'd always have a job, and I always have.
Did you always have an interest in amusement parks and roller coasters?
Yes, ever since I was a kid. That small town Cary, where I grew up, you know, that was the only time we left town. Once a year. Well, I was an altar boy. I hesitate to tell you that. But the deal was, if you're an altar boy all year, every summer there was a field trip. One year we'd go to Cedar Point, the next year we'd go to Russell's Point. And that was worth, the whole year's worth. And so, yeah, that was outside of Christmas, which you didn't leave town for. That was the big thing to look forward to in a year. Count down the days to go to Russell's Point or Cedar Point.
So the trips to the roller coaster were your payment or your reward for the rest of the year's work. So do you remember what your first ride was?
Oh, absolutely. It was Russell's Point. It was a Silver Streak roller coaster. It had headlights, which lit up.
Wow.
It was streamlined. We thought it was better than Cedar Point's.
And that would have been in the 50s?
That would be in the 40s.
40s,
48.
okay.
48 was the first year.
Do you remember when you moved here, had you heard about Gordon State Park prior to coming here? Or do you remember when you first heard about it?
Yeah, not at all. And I didn't hear about it for a couple years or even more. Basically, a lot of people I ran around with weren't from St. Mary's. All the coaching, I don't think there was any coach that was born in St. Mary's, so they didn't have family that would tell tales, grandparents and things like that. But every once in a while, then, I guess I got to know George Neergarter and Vern Dunges through politics, and they're big on local history.
Before we move on to the Gordon State Park, who were some of those coaches that you first coached with when you were here?
Well, Martindale, of course, and
Right.
Quint Clark, Jim Taylor. I'm trying to think.
Well, Skip too.
Skip, of course, me, and then a little later, Larry Saback.
Sure.
A couple years later, Dave Burkholder.
Sure.
And these are all people from away.
Yeah, yeah. Well, when we want to talk here about Gordon State Park, I'm curious what tools you used to start your research and to look into the park itself.
Well, of course, the best resource is George Neergarter and Vern Dunges, and Vern had just thousands of postcards. That was his thing, and an awful lot of them were on Gordon State Park. And then he knew some of the stories that went with the postcards. And George, too. George, of course, knew all about St. Mary's history from beginning to end, including Gordon State Park. So that was. Now, there was no Google, which really made it hard, so it was vertical files in the libraries in Salina, St. Mary's, Lima. Microfilm of newspapers.
I still do a little bit of microfilming today for some, when I look into title searching for old deeds, but I can't imagine pouring through newspaper articles that way and trying to find things. So was it a lot of newspaper records?
Was there, not as many as you would like, but maybe a half dozen. And pictures were hard to find too, because people didn't take pictures. If they did, they took a picture of themselves in front of a amusement stand or something like that.
They weren't as interested in taking pictures of the actual attractions or roller coasters themselves. They were taking pictures of themselves and their family.
Eating a hot dog or something like that.
Right. Were there anything during when you were looking into that you wish you could have found more of, or is there anything out there that's still a mystery to you that you'd like to try to figure out?
What I really would have liked, and this is the bane of all genealogists and historians, is I didn't talk to people soon enough. When I first came to St. Mary's, there were lots of people who had gone to Gordon State Amusement Park, and I didn't ask them questions. And then later on, when I tried to ask some of the older people, like Ed Noble, he didn't always remember very much. That's a long time ago. So, you should ask right away. Give me the stories, what happened, something funny, is this true?
And try to get it written down or on tape.
Yes, tape recording.
Right. Because it's unfortunately it's every year here we lose more and more of that history if we don't.
That's right. Yeah, now we're down to the, first it was second-hand information, now it's fourth-hand information. And,
sure.
And you have to be careful of that.
Well, you already talked a little bit about Indian Lake. I wanted to talk about these style parks first. So Do you know how these style of parks got started with the Gordon State Park and Indian Lake, other resort style? What led to them, and how many of them were around here?
Not very many with roller coasters. There were amusement parks in, Findlay and Lima and so on, but strangely, the closest roller coaster before Gordon State was Indian Lake. And then you had to go to like Hamilton, to Lizardsville, or you had to go to Toledo. Yeah, we've always had a lack of roller coasters in the area.
I've seen an Ohio history piece that talked about that these were kind of at the end of the train line, but from a lot of big cities. Buckeye Lake, I think, was one of them. And
right.
How did that work, or how did the electricity in the trains at the time help with this?
Right. Well, for instance, there was an interurban that went from Wapak to St. Mary's. Typically, this didn't happen, but typically you would have an amusement park at Moulton, because the interurbans had problems on the weekends. During the weekdays, all the workers went back and forth, either from Wapak to St. Mary's and vice versa, and shopping and like that. But on the weekends, stores were all closed. Nobody worked on Saturday and Sunday, and so they sat idle. So they built amusement parks trying to get people to jump on their interurbans and go someplace.
And we take that such for granted now, just being able to jump in a car and go everywhere, but so much was driven by the trains and how the schedule of the trains and where you could get to and where you're from. And I think it led to a lot of our development that we see now, because that's where the trains went.
Right.
Do you know of, this obviously does not still exist on our lake. Are there parks like this that still exist out there?
We're losing them fast, of course. We lost Lizardsville. We've lost not Coney Lake, Six Flags up by Cleveland. Geauga Lake, it died. We almost lost Indiana Beach over in Indiana. I wonder if that guy regrets his investment right now. So yeah, they're having a tough time, small parks, and they deserve to be supported. You can go and stand in line for 3 minutes instead of 3 hours. There's no parking fees. They have really good roller coasters, some of them. So yeah, I hate to see them die. So
there are still some. Indiana Beach, you said Cognac Lake is still around?
Yes, Cognac Lake's still around.
Where's that located?
It's south of Erie, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Just across the border. And that's got a really neat old coaster. But boy, they almost died 2 or 3 or 4 times and still may be in trouble.
So it's a little bit harder to find those nowadays. But if somebody's interested in this sort of thing, you can kind of go back and see. Obviously, it's been modernized a little bit, but you can see what these type of parks looked like and see the footprints. And some of the coasters are probably similar.
Well, Conneaut Lake still has their old hotel, which is a huge 3-story, sprawling, wooden, painted hotel.
Wow.
And I've stayed there several times. It's really neat. You have to wait about 7 or 8 minutes for the water to get to your room, though, hot water, because it's the old plumbing system. But yeah, you can pretend that you're back in the 20s and rich, because that's where the rich people used to stay.
You can get the 1920s experience in more ways than one, then it sounds
That's right.
like. Well, let's go ahead and talk about Gordon State Park. Let's first talk about this land. I noticed that, and we're going to refer a lot to your model here, but this is Parkway Drive, which is there today. This is the railroad that goes across East Bank Road, 364, still there today. And then this is where the park was located. So what was this land? What was it before the park? How did it become the park?
Okay, that's a real interesting story. One of the major movers in St. Mary's at that time was Robert Gordon. He owned half of the old mill, which we're now restoring. He owned half a bank. He owned real estate all over St. Mary's, and he owned Villanova, the land that became Villanova. He was selling off lots for people to build vacation houses out there. His major problem was the entrance to Villanova, which you've just pointed out, and this is Gordon State Drive. It goes to the marina now. That was a swamp. So it was a real eyesore, and a lot of people probably turned around before they actually got to Villanova and said, we don't want any part of this. So he didn't know what to do with it. He had been a state legislator and had a lot of pull in Columbus, and his best friend was Harold Neely. Harold was the son of Lemon Neely, the big oil baron, probably the richest person ever to live in St. Mary's.
Yeah, well-known name in town.
Yes, and Neely was mayor of St. Mary's, so you got a state legislature and a mayor. They get together, and they concocted this idea. Gordon would donate this 13 acres of swamp to the state of Ohio, and he had enough pull that the state of Ohio accepted it. Then in turn, the state of Ohio leased the land back to Harold Neely for a nominal fee, $1 a year or something like that. And then the deal was that Neely was going to build an amusement park there, and he would get rich, and then Gordon would sell even more property because this was just where people building summer cottages would like to come in the summer. And so that was the idea of the...
And I guess Gordon got to keep the name even though Neely owned it?
No, Gordon died in 1924 or 5, right before the park was even built, actually. And so Neely named it after him, kind of in honor of him,
okay,
as a thank you for making this deal work.
Okay, so even though it was a state park, the state had accepted it, it was being leased to somebody privately to build an amusement park on it. So that explains the name, but why it wasn't your traditional state park
Right.
at that time. Okay, and then this area just a little bit. So that Pavilion Dance Hall down there, is that where the current Freedom Outdoors Marina is?
Yes.
Okay.
The marina is only about a third or a fourth the size of this. But yes, that's exactly where the marina is now.
And I thought it was interesting to note that where the marina now has a channel, that was actually the west bank of that was the north bank of the lake. East-north bank of the lake. And the east bank went all the way to East Bank Road.
Right.
There was no land in between there that we see now with the dog park and with the shelter houses and all that.
That was all landfill done in the 70s.
And that was interesting to find out too. I didn't realize that was done so recently, that all the way up until the 60s and 70s when you came to town, this was still like this. The north bank still went all the way up to the edge, and the east bank still went all the way up to 364.
And you know, there's a concrete wall, water break, still goes out into the lake.
Right.
It's now crumbling away, but it goes out there. That was built as protection from the waves coming and sweeping immediately over this and flooding it even more.
Okay.
Because this was about knee-deep in water.
And this was the swamp that they built the park on then.
Right.
Was the park built in stages or all at once?
It was built in stages. The first thing was the dance hall in 24, and it was really popular, and it was a really big hit. And then in 26, they had plans for the roller coaster, and in between they had other smaller rides like that, but the merry-go-round was built after the coaster. So 2 years after the dance hall, then they built the roller coaster.
Was Neely the only investment behind it, or were there other individuals?
There were probably other investors because the name of the company was Amusement something or other. But he was the big money. You know, he inherited all that from his dad, and his dad died in 25, so he got all that was left over from that. As far as the footprint, you started pointing out the roads. This is the way everyone goes to Villanova. This road, it's really Gordon State Boulevard, goes to the marina.
Right.
There are two roads. In between that now is just grass. That used to be the parking lot. So to try to get your bearings when you go out there, you know, find that arrowhead-shaped piece of land. That was the parking lot. And then everything from there to the water, which is now a channel, that was the amusement area.
And I'm seeing that the roller coaster actually reached from the inlet all the way over to East Bank Road.
Right.
So how did you enter the park?
Well, you could enter the park, and this is the neat part, through the roller coaster. There was a tunnel there, so you could park in the parking lot, come through the tunnel, and into the park. And here's a boardwalk that you could keep your feet dry. Or you could enter from the East Bank Road. There's a picture right next door at Generations, huge picture on the wall, taken from that angle. East Bank Road, looking down the boardwalk this way, and you can see the roller coaster on your right as you come there.
Very neat. Just imagine being able to enter a park through under the roller coaster.
Yeah.
Just a very unique circumstance. So,
you know, I should mention this too, because I have trouble getting it through my head because of all the new experiences, but there were no gates, no fencing, there was no price of admission. You just wandered in and wandered out. So you really could enter from around the roller coaster over here at Park at Villanova on someone's yard, which they did. That was a big issue. And then walk around it. You could come by boat. You could come by East Bank Road, or you could park in a parking lot and come through the coaster.
did you just pay per attraction then to ride
That's right.
everything? Okay.
So, you know, there are people there, I'm sure, spent the whole day, you know, just like the mall rats 10 years ago. Kids would come and not spend a dime and just mill around all day long and meet people.
Gotcha. Well, we're going to go ahead and take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to dig into the specific attractions of Gordon State Park. And of course, we're going to get talking a little bit more about the devil's backbone here, the roller coaster. So be sure to join us on the other side of this.
This segment of Rider Nation Station has been brought to you by Plus One Professionals Real Estate, selling St. Mary's from the corner of Spring and Chestnut since 1982. American Manufacturing Solutions, your total logistic partner, investing in the St. Mary's community.
Welcome back to Rider Nation Station's Vodcast. I'm joined here again with Denny Long, and we're talking about Gordon State Park. Denny, let's talk about some of the specific attractions out here in Gordon State Park. While we're talking about these, I want to say that we're going to have some photos that we've been able to find. I wanted to thank Doug Merritt, Dave Sims. I think Lynn Paulus was able to find a lot of these. I found them on Facebook. So as we're talking about certain of these, they're going to be going on the video. And I just wanted to thank those individuals for being able to put that together and put it on Facebook for a whole new generation to find out about this sort of stuff. Wanted to talk first maybe about the dance halls and the creamery. Where were they, and what kind of services did they provide?
Well, the dance hall, which we've already pointed out, was the most popular thing. And they had a house band, Kaiser, and they also had Sexy Holtworth for a while. Saxy Holtworth for a while. And then they had famous bands like Guy Lombardo and Whiteman and Pee Wee Herman and, well, a lot of big name bands that would come in just for the weekend like that. So it was hugely popular. Right next to the dance hall was an ice cream store, restaurant. They also rented boats, and it was called the Wind Blew In. Isn't that clever?
Yeah.
Wind Blew In.
Kind of like the in-between.
The
Like
in-between.
lots of, yeah. The wind blew in. Okay.
That was managed for a long time by Simon, Bill Simon, that later on ran the bungalow.
Okay.
Where the hair place is now. So he moved, when this folded, he moved into town and was in charge of the bungalow.
What kind of services did the inn provide?
No, just the restaurant.
Just the restaurant?
Just the restaurant. They named it Inn, I guess, because it went with Wind Blew.
Okay.
But it was not an inn, and the source of people staying over.
Okay. You talked about some of the famous people. With the boardwalk there going in between, how big was that boardwalk?
My best guess is 18 feet. I read an article that said it was 30 feet. But that's pretty preposterous. More like 18. And that's judging by the railing that was along the side and people that you could, 18 at the most.
Any idea how big the Ferris wheel was?
Yes, it was 60 feet, which is the typical fair merry-go-round like we have at the Auglaize County Fair is 40. So
pretty big.
It was pretty big, yeah.
What about the miniature roller coaster or miniature train?
Train. Well, that That was a strange kind of device. It didn't look like a train. It kind of looked like a roller coaster on the ground. And it was run by electricity. It would run up and down the track, and it had three rails. So the middle one was electrified.
Kind of like a modern subway or something.
Modern subway or the old Lionel trains.
Okay.
Had a third rail that was hot. Now, you kind of wonder how you can get by with that, because you got kids running back and forth over that, and if you step on the New York subway thing, you're toast, and there you probably would be too. So they came up with a neat idea. Here, we'll do a little physics, I guess. So if this is the rail,
Okay.
you be the rail, and it's hot.
Yep.
So that people wouldn't get hurt, all along it, they came up with this device, a U-shaped wooden device that would cover it so nobody could step on it. Then the feed came from a hook-like device like this that could hook underneath and into the train, and you could move along and not get electrocuted. So this would electrify it, and this would cover it, and then the train would run.
So they kept it as safe as they could with that.
Yes, except, underneath, all you had to do was stick your hand under it, and if the kids back then were as ornery as my grandkids, that was a real dangerous situation.
So we came for history, and we've got a little bit of mechanical engineering
You got
here.
some mechanical engineering.
Good. How were you able to discover that?
There was never a diagram of it, just descriptions in some articles, and so you piece it together.
Yeah.
And knowing, as you said, the New York subway, how it works with the third rail, and then they covered it with wood, and then they fed it from underneath.
And was that just an out and back then?
Yes.
Okay. Didn't really go
Didn't
go
turn
anywhere.
around. No, just out and back.
Maybe for kids.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Although it was big enough that adults could ride it. I mean,
Okay.
it was like benches.
Okay. All right. I've heard about this old mill ride. Then I've heard it described as an old mill coaster, old mill boats. What was this ride?
It was a water ride.
Okay.
I don't know why they called it a coaster, except maybe that would get more attention. But it was one of those where you'd crank a boat up 10, 12 feet, and then it'd come down, and the impetus would take it all the way around. At first, they had one tunnel there, and it was real popular because it was like Tunnel of Love,
Oh, okay.
So next year, they had two tunnels. You had more love. And the third year, the whole thing was enclosed. It was a dark ride.
Okay.
Whole lot of love. So that was a real popular ride, but it wasn't a thrill ride. It was more like a, what do you call those in the parks now, where you have a river cruise where you get on a tube and...
Oh, a dark ride or a lazy river.
Lazy river.
Sure.
Yeah, it's more like that. Only it was in boats. Those were like rowboats.
And then I've heard about a seaplane that was out here.
Yeah, that would be the airplane swing.
Okay.
There are still a few, not very many, of the rocket rides. They consist of a tower, maybe 60, 70 feet tall. Used to be one at Indian Lake on the other side of the amusement park. You'd have to go over the bridge. And they'd have these big silver rocket ships. And you'd sit in there, and then they'd take off, and it'd swing out, and you'd go real high like that. This preceded the rocket ships because people weren't attuned to rocket ships.
You had no idea what a rocket ship was in the 20s.
They didn't. But they didn't know what an airplane was because World War I had biplanes. And so they fitted this out with airplanes. Long tubes with seats in it, benches, and then two wings. So they could, be in there and be the Red Baron or whatever and go swinging around like that.
And tell me about these Curtiss cars, too.
Curtiss cars are invented by a man named L.L. Curtiss, and he was from Dayton, Ohio. He was paraplegic, and he invented one of the first practical wheelchairs, motorized wheelchairs. And that went over so big, and that was popular after World War I, too, because,
A lot of injuries coming back.
Oh, yeah, a lot of need for wheelchairs after any war. And so then he thought he would branch out. He invented these little cars, like go-cars, and they would run around anywhere. Those now are really valuable. The American Pickers on that show came across one in one episode and bought it for thousands of dollars. And I priced one on it was for sale on the internet, and it was like $2,300. So I didn't buy that. But yeah, they were a big hit too. And they would go around a track, had a little bit of a rope fence around it or something, and kids ride that.
So these are some of the more exciting things to do, but there were leisure activities, right?
Yes.
There was a Mary Jane boat. What was that?
It was like a huge barge. It held 40 people, had a roof on it, had fringe all the way around the side, and benches in it. And people get on that, and they'd putz around the lake and look at different things like that.
You think he probably left from the inlet area?
Yes.
Or? Okay.
Although sometimes it would leave from the state offices,
Okay.
which is that waterway. Right now, it's the cement fishing pond that kids go.
Sure.
That used to be the state marina where the state boats dock, but they would also dock the Mary Jane there.
Okay.
And I said before, the In Blue Inn also rented rowboats by the hour. So you could do that. And there were speed boats. The Curtis boats, the wooden boats are beautiful.
Yeah, I think we have some pictures of that we could show too. So.
Yes.
There are lunch stands and slides.
Yes, the slides are on the first beach, which is over here beyond. You have to go across the channel.
And that's still where the first beach is today?
Still where it is today. That was part of the amusement park.
How tall were the slides?
They look pretty tall, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't have any good pictures. Most of the pictures are from up above.
Okay.
But they look to be really tall.
Yeah. And then the lunch stands and concessions.
They had hamburgers, they're supposed to be world famous, and they had barbecued pork. They had taffy. Taffy was real big in the 20s. And probably popcorn and other such things.
Are there any other unique aspects that I'm leaving out right now that I...
Well, we need to stress the boardwalk, for sure, because without the boardwalk, this wouldn't work. The boardwalk kept people up out of the mud, off the ground, and it would go from one area to another, and that's where people really hung out. They had benches along the sides of the boardwalk where people could just sit and watch everybody go by. Now, a big problem with that is, my gosh, that had to be a nightmare trying to keep the boardwalk up. We didn't have pressurized wood, and anybody that's built a pier or a backyard patio out of regular wood know that after 4, 5, 6 years, it needs replaced. Mm-hmm. So that had to be a nightmare.
Let's just talk about your model here for a second.
Okay.
When did you build this model? How long did it take? And how did you figure out where everything went and what it looked like?
There is a diagram of the park, a real crude, incomplete, not to scale diagram, but that was a big help. That was really the key. And then, of course, the pictures would give you some idea. You could figure out where the old mill was in relationship to the roller coaster and where the boardwalks are. The picture I mentioned that's in the restaurant now. I don't know how long it takes. It was the sort of thing where, it'd be a bad TV program on, I'd go down and work for an hour.
Did you start this while you were still teaching, or was it a retirement project?
No.
Okay.
I wrote an article for the Roller Coaster magazine some 10 or 15 years ago, and I wanted a model of the coaster. And so I built this coaster to have a picture, to something to illustrate the park. And then I said, well, I might as well add this, and pretty soon I got a railroad.
Yeah, I think a lot of projects are like that. You start
Right.
remodeling one room in your house, and it turns into the whole thing. So similarly, you built the coaster, and you can't have the coaster without having the rest of the park described there.
And I didn't have a boardwalk at first, and I thought, got to have a boardwalk. So
Right.
did a lot of toothpicks.
Very important there. Okay, so I think it's time. Let's go ahead and talk about the Devil's Backbone here.
Okay.
I would say probably the main feature of the park, probably could see this from miles away as you're driving through St. Mary's.
Yes, you can see it from the other side of the lake because there are pictures that you can make it out.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, let's take it down.
Want to take it off? All right.
Okay.
So the Devil's Backbone.
Devil's Backbone is an out and back coaster, which means you get on the coaster right here at the station. You go up the first hill, the second hill, third hill. Now you're out. Then you come back. These are called bunny hops, little hills. You bunny hop back to the station and then again. The first hill was 70 degrees and it was 72 feet. 72 feet is a decent size, but the main thing is the 70 degrees. If this coaster were running today, it would have the fourth steepest hill of any wooden roller coaster.
Wow.
And the real secret to the coaster, though, this out and back's nothing special. That's the Blue Streak at Cedar Point. Has about the same dimensions, 2,300 feet, the same size hills, more or less, the same speed. And by the way, this didn't go 90 miles an hour like some of the articles say. It went 45 or 50 miles an hour. 70 miles an hour wasn't hit until the 200-foot coasters, steel coasters, were made. But the real secret to the coaster is the turnaround. Most roller coasters, after they go over their 3 big hills, turn around and come back. So they come out, they go up, they make a nice easy U-turn, and they go back. The Devil's Backbone, instead of that, it comes out, makes an S-turn, sharp S-turn, because that's not much space, big fan curve down to the ground, another big fan turn, an S-curve, and back to the station. That had to be just wild. As you'll see on the model, it was held from coming apart by centrifugal force by these cables in the middle. But that wasn't good enough. In addition, they had to put all these props on the outside just to keep the coaster from tearing itself apart. So again, you come out over the 3rd hill, up, around this big fan turn, down to ground level, another fan turn, S-turn, and bunny hop back. There's never been a coaster like it, and there'll never be one. First of all, it had to be a maintenance, and then it was dangerous. I'd ride it, sure I would. But you'd have some second thought.
Did you have any records of there being any accidents or deaths or anything like that?
There were 2 people fell off the coaster. One of them fell off at the first hill, like that. He was trying to walk from one car to the other on the bar. He was drunk, like that. He fell off, but he wasn't hurt. And he had taken his shoes off, by the way. They found his shoes in that thing. He thought it was easier to. And then somebody else fell across on the turnaround, and he wasn't hurt either. They probably fell in the muck, is what they did. They fell. There was a doctor quoted as saying that the fellow who fell off here would have probably killed himself if he had been sober. Huh. But neither one was, which explains what he did. And by the way, this never occurred to me till years after I'd started reading it. This is right in the middle of Prohibition. I mean, people weren't drinking then. And yet we had 2 people in a short time fall off a roller coaster drunk.
Sure.
Well, some people say that Prohibition didn't apply to Mercer County or Auglaize County. I don't know if that's true or not.
Well, very interesting. Like all modern wood roller coasters, I'm assuming this was very rough.
I would think so, yes. And as it wears, and this is true with all coasters, as they age, as they wear, they get rougher and rougher and rougher. And this had to be, just tearing itself apart every time they went around with it. So I would guess it's rough.
I know you were saying that there's pictures of those supports sticking out, and it looks like it was almost still under construction, but in reality it was just that they had to keep those supports going.
Yes. Craig Noble supplied a picture, and he said, I think I have one when they're building it because it has all this structure, the props and everything. But that was just the way they kept it together.
And it's fascinating, we'll get here in a second about how long the park lasted, but I'm just wondering how long it could have lasted, the coaster could have lasted with that type of turnaround there and all the forces, kind of tearing it apart at every train that went by. You know how many trains were running on it?
Yeah, I just read something on that. I think I told you. They supposedly ran 4 trains, which I find it hard to believe. The Blue Streak at Cedar Point, same dimension, runs 2 trains. They run a train around and then bring it in the station, and when it comes in the station, the other one leaves, and then they load it, and so on. So you never have 2 of them running at the same time. They had 4 trains, which means there were 2 out there running around, one of them loaded, and one of them taking off.
And that's also a safety thing, right?
Well, they run them together. If anything goes wrong, you're going to have a 4-train pile up there.
Right.
And that can't happen on any other coaster because they don't run. The only time they would run 2 trains at a time is one of those long ones like the Beast, where they'd make sure they're halfway around before they start the other one.
Interesting. Well, very neat. I'm glad we saved the best of the park for last there with the Devil's Backbone. And it sounds like a very unique aspect of Gordon State Park. Are there any coasters like, of course there's nothing like this, but are there any around that we could still experience today to come close?
No. No. That turnaround, there's none like it. All the turnarounds are like the U-shape I told you. Some of them go lower, but 99%. Now, some of them now will go and the turnaround will be a spiral and they come back. But nobody would attempt the sort of thing we saw.
What about coasters of that age?
Yes, there are some, but the granddaddy is Coney Island Cyclone in New York City.
Okay.
Out there, and that's a great coaster too. And you turn around and you're looking out there at the ocean, and that's kind of neat. But it's an easy turnaround. There's a minor league ballpark there. It's called the Cyclones, because in left field is the Cyclone. So you can hear and see people riding the coaster, or you can ride the coaster and watch minor league baseball the other place.
Are there any others that age? Or?
Yes, there are quite a few around, and some of them are standing and not operating. But there are some 1927 era coasters around. The one at La Swordsville is a 27 coaster, and it's standing, not operating. The one at Geauga Lake is a 20 era standing, but not operating. We hope we can save it. Conneaut Lake is a coaster that. In fact, a couple years ago, a buddy of mine went there, and they needed volunteers to paint it because it badly needed painted. So we got to stay for a couple days in the old hotel, and then all day long we'd go out there and stand in the water and paint the roller coaster.
Just as a volunteer, huh?
Just as a volunteer.
That's really neat. How many were there? A lot of volunteers out there with you?
Yes, there were 50, 60.
Wow.
Yeah, we got it painted.
What a neat experience.
Yes.
So, if anybody travels to Conneaut Lake, you can say you painted that coaster there.
Right,
last
I'll
time.
point out the places that I painted.
Excellent, excellent. Well, let's talk about the downfall. The park's not there any longer. How long did it last? What happened?
It lasted 9 years, 24 to 33, and the coaster lasted 7. The obvious reasons: the dance hall burned down in 32.
Okay.
And that charred the coaster. Didn't burn it, but it charred it. And then there was a tornado come through and knocked down most of it. By the way, that was the second tornado to hit it. When they were building it, a tornado came through and tore down the second hill before they got it up.
Really?
So people always told me when I came here that the lake divided storms and that we were safe. Well, in the short history of that park, there were 2 tornadoes we know of that hit. And then, of course, the Depression. But, all the other parks survived the Depression. And they didn't. I really think it never made money ever, from beginning to end. There was the maintenance problem. There was the distance problem. The 40,000, 45,000 attendance, I'm skeptical of. In the first place, I don't know where you put that many people.
When I heard that, and I know this area now from standing out there, I can't imagine 45,000 people.
No.
I can't imagine 45,000 people in St. Mary's as a whole town, let alone this little area.
Right. Well, I just read something that the Mercer County Fair 2 years ago were all excited. They set all-time records of 70,000. That was for 7 days.
Right.
And I can't believe that fair doesn't pull in more people than this would.
Right.
But there's a lot of exaggerations.
And I kind of wondered if maybe they added together, on a weekend we had 15,000, 15,000, 15,000 or something like that.
Right.
But even that seems a little far-fetched for the area.
Yeah, I went back and checked, and it said the 4th and 5th of July, they had 45,000 each day. I thought maybe combined, which might be reasonable, which is probably what the county fairs would get one day, 20,000 on a weekend, and then on the weekdays less. But I know they suffered. There's a story of the band leader, Joe Kaiser. The business was so bad that he decided he needed publicity. So he had an old Model T Ford he took up and put on the railroad tracks, waiting for a train to come. And then he called all the newspaper people and said, hey, we'll have a press conference. The train hit the Model T, smashed it, and then he called another press conference and said, I'm okay. And everyone from all around came to look at the big train wreck and Joe Kaiser who survived it and so on. Free publicity.
Wow, that's really neat. Anything to get your free publicity back then, I guess.
Yes.
Guess they didn't care about false police reports and that sort of thing back then. So,
no.
What happened to the land after the park closed?
Well, people stopped paying the $1 a year, and it reverted back to the state.
Okay. Did they reuse any of the buildings or attractions?
The only thing they've done with it is they put up the state marina that's there, and that's the only building on the whole property. They don't know what to do with the parking lot area. In fact, about 20 years ago, they declared that it was a game preserve and let the grass grow high. They didn't have to mow it. But as you see, it's surrounded by roads, and it soon became a roadkill zone. And so that was abandoned. The state doesn't know what to do with it. There's 13 acres there that outside of this and the boat ramps, parking lot,
Yeah.
it's just there. You wonder sometimes what would have happened if the private industry had gotten a hold of it. We might have had a mini Otterbein there. We might have had a mini Sophomore Shores. We might have had, I'm thinking like on the way to Salina, those new condos they've built with boat thing, something like that.
Any idea what happened to the boardwalk? Did they leave that in for a while, or?
I know what happened to the roller coaster. They took it down and sold the wood for parts, for lumber. So I suspect they did the same thing with the boardwalk if there was any lumber there worth saving.
Right.
Otherwise, I'm sure they just burned it.
Probably would have been pretty water-soaked and
Water-soaked and rotted.
rotted, right?
Yeah.
Well, very interesting. Yeah, they just to clarify, they didn't use any part of the old dance hall, or did they rebuild it after the fire?
Yes, they did. In fact, after the fire and after the amusement park was gone, they built a smaller dance hall that never caught on. So then they took the small dance hall, moved it up to the East Bank Road, thinking that would attract more attention, and it didn't. So then they turned it into a roller rink, and that didn't work. And then in 1941, that burned down.
Okay.
So both dance halls eventually burned down. It was real tough because amusement parks still have a problem with this. Sit all winter, they're not fenced in, they're not patrolled, and all these fires are arson. People wander through, and kids, I hope it wasn't grown people, do something stupid, and then the park's gone.
If anyone wants to learn more about this, where should they look?
There's a lot on the internet, not a lot, but there is what there is to learn. The vertical file, the St. Mary's Library, has everything I have, all the materials.
You've given a lot of that, or made copies to the library?
Yes, it's in a folder in the vertical file. So, any of the papers, newspaper clippings I found, postcards, interviews, it's there.
Anything else around the lake that interests you that you'd like to dig into, or you'd like other people to dig into?
I was thinking, I'm probably not going to do any of this, but I'm really interested in all the old houses around St. Mary's and the lake. Who built the house? Now, we know about the castle, some, although I don't know the whole history. Been trying to find out about the house out by Goodyear that the plant manager used to occupy. Who was wealthy enough to build that house in the first place, and who did he sell it to, and who built it? But you go up and down everything from Walnut Street to Wayne Street. There are houses with pillars. There are houses built of sandstone. Who built those? Who were those people, and what was the history of that house? Somebody else can undertake that, though. So
the houses of St. Mary's.
Houses of St. Mary's.
Gotcha.
120-year-old houses. And they don't have to be mansions, although those are the most, there's some small houses that are 120 years old, built in the late 1800s, too. I don't know that there are any log cabins, but something of that order.
Sure. Well, I think that brings us to the final part about Gordon State Park here. So we're going to take another commercial break. When we come back, we're going to discuss word association with Denny Long. So we're going to throw out a word and have you just whatever comes to your mind, appropriate-wise, Denny. So we'll be right back after this.
This segment of Rider Nation Station has been brought to you by Plus One Professionals Real Estate, selling St. Mary's from the corner of Spring and Chestnut since 1982. American Manufacturing Solutions, your total logistic partner, investing in the St. Mary's community.
And we're back here with Denny Long on Rider Nation Station's Vodcast. We've talked today about Gordon State Park, and now we're going to do a little word association, Denny. So, first word for you, and you can look here on the screen with me, the beast.
The beast is the beast, and that's been said many times. There's nothing like it. It's not the fastest. It's maybe the longest. It's maybe not the best, but it's special. It's different. There's nothing else like it.
Skip Bachman.
My hero.
Millennium Force.
Maybe the best coaster. Maybe the best coaster there is. It's smooth, but yeah.
And it's 20 years old, and people are still saying that about it.
Right.
That's a pretty amazing thing. And the last one here, Wing T.
The best offense.
Excellent.
Still is.
Well, I think that brings us to the end of our show today. Wanted to thank my guest, Denny Long, for being here. Anything else you want to say, Denny, before we leave today?
Nope. Thanks for having me.
We learned a lot today. Please, if anybody at home has questions or comments, we'd love to have interactive correspondence. So submit them in the comment section of our videos or email us at ridernationstation@gmail.com. We've come to the end of our show. It is our hope that the Rider Nation Station and this vodcast entertained, educated, and enlightened you and elevated your perspective about St. Mary's, Ohio. We hope that the story has been told that augments the development of relationships, old and new, to promote growth for all who do, did, and will call St. Mary's our home. Again, I want to thank Mr. Denny Long for enlightening us regarding the Gordon State Park on Grand Lake St. Mary's. Rider Nation Station will be airing more of these informational vodcasts and hopefully Rough Rider football games in the fall. Stay tuned for additional information, and please tune in and share this station with your friends and family. As Doug Spencer says, I hope you think positively about our town, the town that we did not inherit from our ancestors, but the town that we borrowed from our grandchildren. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching another edition of Rider Nation Station, brought to you by Advanced Manufacturing Solutions, Plus One Professionals Real Estate, Laura Young State Farm Insurance, Minster Bank, The Evening Leader, and JT's Brew and Grill. Please remember to subscribe to us on YouTube and follow us on Facebook. It's free.